Good afternoon. When we think of assaults in the workplace, we tend to think of happenings like the Fort Hood incident, where media focuses on what happens with a large-scale tragedy. But in one profession, assaults happen on almost a daily basis. A lot of you might be thinking, what profession could this be? You might think police, maybe prison workers, even post office, because that's what people think of the post office. But you'd all be wrong. The one profession that gets the most assaults is nursing. The Charter for the National Advisory Council on Nurse Education and Practice, in their 2005 report, defined assaults as both physical and verbal. Physical is hair pulling, biting, scratching, hitting, punching, pushing, up to stabbings, shootings, and rapes. Verbal includes intimidation, bullying, threatening, those types of behavior. The U.S. Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 2001 said 48% of all workplace incidents in the United States, 48% are nurses. So that means 1 out of every 2 assaults in the United States in the workplace is a nurse. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, goes on to say that 25 out of every 10,000 people who have to get health care for being assaulted are nurses. This is a 12% greater rate than in the private sector. So think about that. We are getting assaulted very, very often. However, Laura Strakowski, in her article, Violence, Not in My Job Description, in 2010, thinks that reporting is way underreported. There are various reasons why people don't report their assaults, and that's because there's no clear policy in institutions about assaults. There is the perception that the nurses will not be taken seriously, that it's a part of their job description, it's something to be expected. There's also the feeling that the nurse could have done something to prevent the assault. There was something the nurse did that caused the assault. May be true, because up to 96% of the assaulters or the offenders, according to Strakowski, are patients, the very people we're here to take care of. Mostly we're talking about male patients, and most of them are cognitively impaired. So we think they're not in their right minds. There's nothing going to be done if we try to prosecute them. So what should we do about this? There needs to be clear policies in every healthcare institution to combat violence in the workplace. Employees cannot be worried about losing their jobs or being retaliated against if they report any violence. Employers must have clear policies about how to report, and they also must have committees and ways for the nurse assaulted to get psychological and medical counseling, not only for the nurse who was assaulted, but also for the ones witnessing assaults. Nurses need to be aware of who is going to be a violent offender. Since there's an increase in alcohol and drug addicts, they can't be taken up to jail while they're intoxicated. They end up in the hospital. These patients should have their charts flagged, and nurses should employ a buddy system so they can be safe. The employers should also give continuing education about how to recognize and anticipate violent behavior and how to combat that. So we've talked about how the nurses and how the employers should combat their workplace violence. But what about the government? It may surprise you to know that physicians in their line of duty, if they're assaulted, their assaulter has a felony charge. But if a nurse is assaulted in the line of duty, it's only a misdemeanor. There are no federal laws that protect nurses like there are federal laws that protect police, firefighters, and emergency medical workers. But states are beginning to recognize that nurses need to be protected. So some states like Illinois are mandating violence prevention programs in all institutions. Other states like Ohio and Massachusetts are broadening their scope and including nurses under the firefighters and police and EMS workers. But it needs to go further than that. The OSHA guidelines that were put out in 2004 need to be made into law and adopted and not to be just a guideline. Violence in the workplace is unacceptable. It has to stop. Employees and employers must get together to combat this violence. Patients and families need to know that this is not acceptable. Violence in the workplace will decrease morale and increase employee dissatisfaction and decrease productivity. Everybody deserves a safe workplace, so let's try to make it so. Thank you.